You start wondering, now that we have graduated into lower middle income, we are no longer in epic countries. How are we going to fare? Because with that graduation, there are certain things that we will no longer qualify to have. Are we prepared for that graduation? How, as a country, do we plan to ensure security of capital? China really took over Africa and started investing, particularly in infrastructure, and that really put a push in most of African countries. We are not an exception. But now it seems as if China is picking up and the growth is not as massive as it used to be. Are we ready to move on without China pushing this infrastructure boost? If you look at the budget in terms of public expenditure in the health sector, around about 85% comes from external sources. Now that the gentleman is in White House and a lot of things are going to be cut supposedly, are we going to maintain the same advancements that we have had?
Professor gave us a very detailed history of where we're coming from, where we've been, and where we are today, and possibly what we need to do to set the stage for the next 25 years. If we're looking at the last 2 years, we've seen significant improvements in terms of public-private dialogue. There's been an enhancement there, and it's really looking at how we can address the business environment. In your view, are you starting to see this dialogue starting to have impact in terms of positive and enhanced business environment?
If you look at areas where we've actually done well, one, it is a recognition of the importance of the private sector in terms of driving the economy, the engine of the economy, and this is actually recognized in most policy papers, in our visions 2025, and again the new vision 2050. The other positive really is access to policy makers, decision makers, regulators. I think doors are open. We can engage at any time. Where there's room for improvement, in terms of the issues, it's about challenges. What we are missing is at the big picture discussions, the reforms and so on. So moving away from policing, in terms of regulations, policing to facilitating.
What can we learn from what we saw happening last year when we saw that a lot of challenges were being posed from the private sector in terms of tax administration?
I think what happened last year clearly was terrible for the environment in which we operate. There's been a lot of dialogue by the Tax Commission, engaged the full spectrum of various sectors, business people, investors, at sort of like level that we have here today, the big corporations, the big investors, but also down to the ordinary mwananchi, the machinga, the border, etc. But the consultations are going well. Authorities lean on the side of the law. The law allows us to do this. But I think more importantly, there is pressure to raise revenue. One thing we mustn't forget is that government is being criticized for continuously borrowing, albeit that they're spending the money on good things, the infrastructure and all that. And we can see that infrastructure. Tax needs to get simple. The administration needs to be easy so that people don't spend too much time dealing with authorities. And I think one thing that we probably learned through this process is that people say, we don't understand the tax. The website that TRA has, they don't understand. People don't understand it. So they ask to comply without being given enough education on what they need to do to actually comply. They just get caught unaware. Someone walks in, asks questions, and then say, bang, this is your assessment.
How do we take these as lessons learned? So Dr. Mwanri, I'd like to start from you in terms of bringing this together, because right now it's looking at government and private sector, but how does the role of research institutions and academia really come and play that facilitating role so that we can all be speaking that same language when we're advocating for these policy initiatives?
Our role has been to really try to undertake some analytical work and to provide evidence that can support the policy-making process, and I think that's an important function. For the surveys that we have been doing over the last 10 years on the business environment, the three most important constraints to private sector growth: tax administration, skills, bureaucracy, and corruption. They keep surfacing. Some of the CEOs here have been responding to our annual executive opinion surveys, which feeds in the Global Competitiveness Report. And we have been discussing these outcomes of these reports with the policymakers and say, look, you cannot expect the private sector to grow sufficiently to help drive sustainable growth of the economy unless you are addressing these critical development challenges. And when we have the opportunity to see the draft development vision as part of the consultation process, and you clearly see emphasis on structural transformation, inclusive growth, competitiveness. And competitiveness is basically driven by the private sector, given that the conditions for attracting investment and attracting business growth are conducive. The commission that the president has formed, which some of you in the private sector seats, like Mr. Mususa here, Mr. Tarimo and others, is an evidence that that the data that is coming and the voices that are coming from the private sector and others who are participating in some of these surveys are informing the policy-making process, and we believe that in the coming years we will see the reforms, we will see the business environment in Tanzania supporting the competition that we see globally.
Thank you very much for panelists for very insightful discussions. I think we need to probably emphasize a little bit more on the impact of, over time, the impact of unpredictability in terms of policy and regulatory frameworks to the overall growth of the economy, particularly when it comes to the appetite for investment, be it for foreign investors, because every time people talk about predictability, people start thinking of people coming from outside. But even people internally, for someone to wish to put their money into a business and sustain it, and you've said it there, they need to know that they'll be able to recoup it tomorrow.
Between fiscal policy and monetary policy, are these two aligned in your mind, especially when we look at sustainable development? And if not, what are the 1-2 major changes or alignment that needs to be done for us to achieve sustainable development?
Fiscal and monetary, they are twin policies. But looking at our economy, the context that we have, most of our problems aren't monetary. We really have an economy with fiscal problems, partly because of, once again, working in silos. You know, you have on one hand, you have Ministry of Finance, you know, and TRA wanting to siphon as much as possible from the economy, and we even post results that we have record collections, but you don't see the other side of it and say, could it be that you are collecting to the extent of killing some of these initiatives which probably would have grown and created more jobs and paid more taxes? We don't think about that. We don't think about saying, can we lower a little bit our so that even those who are in the informal sector that are running away from all the complicities that are there, one gentleman talked about how difficult it is to pay taxes and all that. Can you lower it and make it simpler so that even people who are not paying taxes can say, I think the cost of not paying taxes is higher than the cost of paying taxes? Can we think that way? So it's just a matter of understanding. We have everyone trying to maximize whatever objective that they have, not knowing how they're impacting other people. I don't know, by design or by default, we work in silos. I've been elsewhere, and wherever I've been, even within universities, you see CEOs going and give lectures. And that does a lot in terms of changing the scenery. We have to get to the point where private sector, think tanks, and academia can sit together and find ways, to get into the future. So my humble submission will be, first we have to change the way we conduct ourselves. So is what is being taught in engineering what I want as an industry? If that's not what I want, what do I do to ensure that that is being changed? Because if you're not doing that, and this gentleman in engineering will be the one writing a policy on STEM, and it will be writing about stuff that is outdated, and we'll go in cycles and cycles and cycles, because we don't know that we have to exist in this symbiotic nature where everyone has to realize that for them to make another step, we have to do it together.